Call to order at 7:12 on March 25th, 2019. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the February 25th meeting. Mr. Perillo, seconded by Mr. O'Brien. Any discussion on that? Nope. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. Thank you. Mr. Casey, Town Engineer Report.
I'll be brief, I think. The sewer I&I and the SSES project, the field work is completed on the SSES, and so now they're just processing and analyzing the data. So we're anticipating that there would be a report in June on the findings. So nothing to report really till June.
Just a question on that, John. What percentage are we at, would you say, right now? We're at about 80% completion, or what would you, if you had to?
Yeah, I'm just ballparking it, yeah.
Ballparking it, about 80%. Okay, thank you.
The pump station project, we had left over from last month's meeting the question about how we would address the architectural and the details with the roof. So Time Bond has returned to discuss that with you. Amy's here from Time Bond.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Amy.
I had sent out an email with some details of the mansard roofs versus coins versus just a flat gravel stop on the top of the buildings. Did you guys get a copy of that? Would you like a copy of it?
Was it sent out to the board, or was it? I saw it. Okay. I know what you're. Take us through. We'll pass it around. Take us through. Re-educate us.
So at Benton Street, Peck's Mill Pond, and Oak Bluff, we're going to have flat roofs. Those flat roofs are required for the HVAC equipment and also for the resiliency aspects of the structures. So the second box on this flat roof option shows a mansard roof, which is like an overhang of about 3 feet that returns back into the wall. And then a gravel stop is just a straight corner at the top of the roofs.
Amy, I'm sorry, can you speak into the mic?
Sure. Coins are an architectural detail that can make the buildings a little more stately or pronounced. It's not required for the structure strength, but it is a detail that you can add. So at the last last WPCA meeting, we had talked about the pump stations and the options. Least expensive is to go with just a straight gravel stop. A mansard would be replacing what you have at some of the pump stations, and then a coin is an updated version that many municipalities are going with these days. So your costs, gravel stop is the baseline, mansard is about $50,000, and coins are about $65,000.
What was? Hi, Amy. How are you? Gravel stop was quoted in our original.
That's a baseline.
That was the baseline.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about a basically a range of what we've already projected up to for either 50 or 65,000.
Right. And so what we could do is, if you like one of these options of a mansard or a coin and you want to make sure that your budget comes in, we could add that detail as an alternate so that if we get favorable bids when we go out to bid to the contractors, you can add it if there's enough money in the budget. That might make your decision a little easier.
I'm okay with that.
I might suggest that you add either a mansard or a coin, because both might look.
Understood. Understood. Questions? Mr. Kent? Yep.
But it's a third option to not add either one?
Third option is just the gravel stop. That's required on any of them.
I'll jump in. We're replacing the peaked roofs with a flat roof. That one, the mansard at Short Beach, maybe replacing that one so it's cosmetically like the beach house. But the others, I'd suggest a flat roof without either the additional improvements would probably be sufficient. Cosmetically even sufficient.
Whatever you guys want.
Mr. Casey, just a quick question. What's at Oak Bluffs? Is that considered, I'm not an architect, is that considered a mansard?
I think that's a regular peak,
That's just a regular roof.
so that would go from a peak roof to a flat.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. Do any of these choices add like years of use to the building, or is it simply architectural, cosmetic stuff?
It's aesthetics.
It's aesthetics.
It's pure aesthetics. Okay. Mr. Poisson.
John, I'm drawing a blank. Where is this Short Beach building right now?
Right when you're going into the entrance off to the right.
Next to the beach.
Right in front of the beach house.
Oh, okay, so I was thinking about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
You might not notice it, but it's there. All these buildings are small, but they're potentially, you're going to have an aesthetic pushback if having a brick building in the residential neighborhood. That's where we first started saying, well, maybe we want to do something to make it look a little bit more appealing, so rather than just a brick box. Sure. Ryan's Lane is the one that we're putting on hold for now, so we don't have to decide at Ryan's Lane. That's right next to the Army engine plant.
So Amy, if I heard you correctly, we can essentially give ourselves an option once these things get towards completion to be able to vote further on that time if they're coming under budget on this, or you need this up front? Is that part of the architectural design?
So we would need to know which option you would want to go with, a
Up front.
mansard or a coin.
Okay.
And then what we could do is write into the bid form
Right.
that the coin or the mansard is an add alternate. So if the bids come in favorably, the town can then add that option because they had enough money for it.
But we have the option, we're not committed to it. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
I would just, I don't know if we want to talk about the mansard roof. You know, that might be something. We were talking about maybe that was a little dated architectural feature that, you know, you might not consider putting that up because it looks not modern. So I don't know if that, if we had any architects' opinions on that?
The architect's opinion is that mansard roofs are going away.
Yeah.
McDonald's are taking them off of their buildings when they redo them. So it's a bit dated, but everything's cyclical.
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there. If we don't want the mansard roof, then we won't bother to design one as an alternate.
John, based off of what Amy was saying before about we can build it in essentially as almost a contingency and see if we come under budget, we can make that determination at that time. But can we send this essentially, or maybe ask the Architectural Review Board to weigh in on it, being that these are different parts of town with different, neighborhoods and stuff like that, and then kind of get their architectural recommendation back, and we'll make the final decision on the dollar amount?
We can do that.
Would that hold you guys up in any way?
As long as they're design, if you're saying they could design it into the alternative so that we can continue to design, then we're not being held up.
Yes.
The decision could be coming later.
I got you. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts or comments? Ms. Dancho?
So the coin feature, it's really hard to tell in this little picture, but is that the most expensive option? That's what you're saying?
It is a more expensive option.
And would all of these buildings be designed the same? Because I think they should be all designed the same.
So Benton Street, Peck's Mill Pond, and Oak Bluff would be similar because we have to take down the above grade walls. At Riders and Short Beach, those concrete walls can stay as they are, so we're not going to replace them because that would be an added expense that's not necessary to withstand a storm. But these are across town, so I think keeping them similar is not, it's not like they're side by side, so you're not
No,
gonna
I know they're
notice.
not side by side, but still it would be like a consistency throughout the town. I don't know if anybody else thinks that. I know beautification would find that as important. But if none of these really add any sort of life expectancy to the building, we should maybe go for the most recent, and then we can decide later if we can't afford it to scale down.
I'm fine with that. Can we send this, or John, how would you recommend we maybe ask the Architectural Review Board for them to weigh in?
I can ask them to do that. Would you like me to ask them just to weigh in on these two options, though, right?
Does anybody else?
We may get other opinions if we just
Right.
ask them for a general opinion.
I think we're kind of between the gravel and the mansard. Would anybody else? Mr. Harden?
So I'll quickly weigh in. So John, I just want to say, whatever you think is feasible for these structures would be acceptable. I don't want to delay the project. So I don't know if it's time sensitive or what the case may be. So I think that, you know what, whatever you feel is appropriate for these buildings, and even though it will not prolong the lifespan of it, I think in lieu of time and the fact that it needs to be done, I would go based on what you believe is acceptable for these structures.
Mr. Poisson?
I agree with Mr. Harden, and I also would like to agree with the architect that if the mansard is going away everywhere, we shouldn't be discussing adding it in if it's going away everywhere else, and especially if it's an extra $50,000 to pay for something that's not in vogue anymore and doesn't affect the operation of the building.
So is there anybody other for comments or any motions that anybody would like to make to move it forward, or I'll open up the floor. Mr. O'Brien?
Well, I know Amy has said twice now, I think you need direction to stay on schedule.
Yep.
That's an important piece. But this money is already budgeted in which way? Is it from a grant, or is it CIP money, or?
The Clean Water
This
Fund
is
is
the
going
Clean
to
Water
be
Fund.
providing a low-interest loan.
Yeah, I think we should act tonight and get things moving.
I'll entertain anybody.
I'd like to offer a motion that excluding Ryder's Lane, that all other buildings be bid just for the flat gravel roof. We don't need the mansard, and we don't need the
Coin.
coin. Thank you.
Do you mean Riders and Short Beach, or just Riders?
I would include Short Beach in the gravel roof only.
So the Short Beach, we're not really touching the facade, so we wouldn't be necessarily doing anything with the roof.
So we would leave the existing mansard in
Yes,
place.
and we said we'd reshingle it to be similar to the restaurant building.
So all buildings just get the flat gravel roof, and Short Beach retains its mansard to be reshingled consistent with the beach house building that's next to it.
Do I have a second?
Second, Dave Harden.
Mr. Harden, any further discussion on that motion? Nope. Mr. Connor? Yes, sir.
Just, I'm not by any means a construction guy, but, so we're talking about taking this down to flat in some cases, if I'm hearing this right? How, is that any cost, or is that, what's the value?
So the value is we need the strength of the precast concrete planks to withstand a flood load against the walls, or in Oak Bluff's situation, a tidal wave.
So, is this way, it has to be stronger, correct? Because it comes down, is that what we're saying?
It's stronger, yes.
It's stronger, okay.
Any further discussion?
So the peaks are going away on all of them except Short Beach.
Riders too.
And Riders, it looks like
Stay
it's already flat.
gabled. Riders is gabled and will stay gabled.
Okay. I think whatever we do, they should all be done the same.
So we're going to be voting on Mr. Can's motion then, which will keep Short Beach as is, but reshingling, just so everyone's clear. Any other further discussion?
And riders as well.
And riders.
And the reason I'm saying that is because it'd be more costly to take the peaked roof off and make it flat than it would be to leave it peaked.
And we also just don't know what's going to be happening down there, so we don't want to spend money on it yet.
No, this is Riders, this is up at,
Excuse me,
near
not
Orinoco
Westmill.
Shores condo.
Right. Thank you. Okay.
Does this include Ryan's Lane, which is on hold?
No, Ryan's Lane's on hold, so we're not making any decisions.
So this is not part of the motion then?
No, Mr. Can did make that part of the motion, that Ryan's Lane was excluded from the motion. And Short Beach would remain the same with reshingling. So that would apply to Oak Bluffs, Peck's Mill, Benton Street, and Riders. Just so everyone's clear. That's what the motion was. Correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. Okay.
So I'm just questioning if you intend to remove the peaked roof off of Riders Lane
Why are we spending money?
and make it flat, or leave it peaked, because we don't have to touch it otherwise.
You want to amend?
Amend the motion that Ryan's Lane is excluded, Short Beach retains its man yard roof with shingles to match the neighboring building. Riders Lane retains its peak roof. All other buildings will get the flat gravel cement roof.
Very good.
Works good, John?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
you.
Great job. Sorry it took us a few extra minutes, but you did a good job. Okay.
Finish up the pump station discussion, we are reviewing the 95 plans with the engineer, and when we are complete with that, we will do these roof work, then we'll be submitting to DEP for their review and approval. And then at the same time, we've asked the Finance Department to start working on the bond ordinance. So we will be providing information to bond counsel so that they could start drafting the ordinance, which would secure our loan when we apply for the Clean Water Fund loan for the project.
Excellent. Any other questions for Mr. Casey? Mr. Can? Yes, sir.
As part of I&I, there was a mention of an outreach to residences to see if they would like any testing, smoke maybe testing. Did anyone take us up on that offer?
We did, especially on the commercial roofs that we were talking about. And I don't have data on that. You'll see that in the report. But we did do several commercial buildings. We didn't find much, so that's I guess a good thing. But they did find some other sources when they were poking around. So, we found a few things that we have to deal with.
Any other questions for John? Nope. Thank you, John. Mr. Hyde, how are you?
This month's report, you've got it in front of you. Yes, I'm sorry. Monthly operating report for February. The flows averaged 10.67, which is down about 10% from January. Water temperature was down another degree to 52.5. Our nitrogen released in February was averaged 411 per day, which is slightly over the annual permit, but year to date we're at 337, which keeps us below the permit. And we're doing very well in that area at this time. Our flows are high. February, we're still 30% higher than we were, but we're headed in the right direction. The plant is actually running pretty well, and we saw signs of it actually starting this weekend. So I think we'll do very well in that this year. Plant pump station maintenance, currently installing the rebuilt pump at Oak Bluff Pump Station. We've repaired the cross flights on the primary tank number 3, and we're in process of, actually tomorrow we will complete repairing the long and the cross flights in primary tank 2. Effluent pump water seal failure. We received a replacement seal for the effluent pump number 2. I'm going to have Associated did electromechanics come in to be involved in the service on that. Chesterton Seal is doing the seal, but there's a bushing in there that we have some questions about, so we're gonna have it reevaluated and make sure that everything is in line. The UV system, Suez is still scheduling a technician to troubleshoot the panel and diagnose fluctuations and measurements in early April. They didn't make it during March. Communication issues, scheduling issues, I'm not exactly sure. But in a nutshell, we're running fairly well for the flows that we have and for the winter that we've had. We're in much better shape than we were a year ago.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. Any questions for Mr. Hyde? Excellent. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Item number 5, old business tabled item, sewer appeals. I'll invite WPCA attorney Mr. Vin Marino up to give us an update on the appeals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vincent Marino of Cohen & Wolf for the authority. Mr. Chairman, of the 5 appeals, we do have agreements on 4 of the 5, and if you would like, we can proceed with those that we have agreements on, and we can dispose of those, and then we could address the last one and how the commission would like to proceed.
So I'll entertain a motion to proceed with the 4 out of 5 per stated by the town attorney.
So moved.
Mr. Ticky, do I have a second? Ms. Dancho? Any further discussion on that? This was what we discussed at the last meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Chair votes aye. And we'll turn it over to you for the final one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first one I'm going to put on the table is the Mill River Country Club appeal. I'm going to hand out for the commission to, just copies of the operative document. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to hand to you and to the clerk. I did get back today, but it was later after I made these copies, a signed copy from the agent for the property owner.
Okay.
So I'm just going
Yeah, come on in.
yourself and the clerk to put those into the record.
I'll verify. Yeah. So, Mr. Marino, just for clarity, I'm just curious. So, is this of the 4 that you said you were good on, that we
Yes.
just approved, this is one of them or not?
This is one of them, yes.
Okay.
What I'm going to do is first go over all the ones with their agreements.
Okay.
And if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I can simply give you a quick overview of it, or I can say it can be adopted as presented.
I have no problem with adopting as presented because we did read them in last time.
That's correct.
And if 4 out of the 5 we're okay with, based off, I'm okay with moving that forward.
That is fine, Your Honor.
Okay.
Pleasure.
Mr.
You'll be
Actually,
Your Honor tonight.
no problem. Mr. Can, quick question for you.
Yes, if there are any variations from what was read into the record.
That's fair.
There are no variations. The only difference between the document that you have and the document that the chair has is that the chair's copy was
From
signed.
30 days ago?
That's correct. There have been no changes from 30 days ago.
Thank you.
Okay. So we can move forward then. And Mr. Marino, do you have all the others signed? The other 3 remaining agreed?
The other 3, I have not gotten a sign back, although the next one that we're discussing, I do have an email.
Okay.
Confirmation that the agreement as presented last time is acceptable for acceptance tonight. That's the Nuevo Pasta Productions one. That's the next one I was going to go to. The other 2, I sent specific emails to the property owner saying that I would be proceeding tonight, and if they had any objections to any of the language as presented, that they should let me know, and neither party reached out to me.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Continue on, and so then we'll discuss the final appeal. Is that what we're?
Yes.
Okay.
So the next one is Nuevo Pasta, and that one, again, there have been no changes to the agreement since last month. The next one is 611 Main Street, LLC. This one, again, no changes since last month. This one, we're going to ask that it be dismissed. The last one I'm going to present to you is the Barnum Wash and Dry LLC. That is one where I had reached out not only to the tenant but to the property owner, because I was concerned that to the extent the tenant defaulted, that this was going to be binding on the property owner. And the property owner was copied on all the communications. I actually spoke with him. He thought the agreement was fair and reasonable under the circumstances and understood that any obligations would ultimately run with the land. And I've received no objection from him or from the tenant. So for these four agreements, I would simply ask that they be accepted as presented. Again, all the property owned, all the terms are identical to the documents you saw last month. There have been no changes. There is, I should correct that, one change, not material. I think a middle initial needs to be changed to L. I have that in an email, and I believe that that was on the Nuevo Pasta one. But there was no material change anywhere.
Okay. So I believe the last motion in the vote was to approve the 4 out of 5. So we do have that in the record. If anybody has any objection to that, we'll continue to move on. Okay. So we're good to move on, Mr. Marino. We'll discuss the final.
Yes, the final one is Ransom's Walk Association, which is a commercial condominium consisting of 11 commercial units located at 1919-1937 Stratford Avenue. The argument of the property owner, and several of the unit owners are here, is that the bills do not represent the fair and reasonable amounts that should be billed to these units based upon their reading of your ordinance. Their position is that you're not billing in accordance with the regulations in your ordinances. I reviewed those regulations. I reviewed the statutes. I also reviewed the process that this commission undertook when it set its rates, as it does annually during the budget process. And I'll let the property owners speak for themselves. They are present. But I would simply say for your recall, to the extent you don't have it, I would refer you to your May 29th meeting, 2018. That's the meeting where you set your rates. And you determined at that meeting that the proposed commercial charge was $4.62 per unit per annum, and the proposed residential was $396 per annum. I do believe that there was some errors in the billings of these unit owners, in that the amounts charged to the several unit owners were variable, as opposed to they all should have been that minimum amount charged by the unit owner. The issue with this subject parcel is it's one water meter that feeds I'm going to call it a strip mall, and then there's one discharge pipe. So you have 11 units operating off of one water meter and one discharge pipe. So it's just factually impossible to ever discern with any reasonable certainty under these circumstances which unit owner is using the water because it just flows through. So talking with Mr. Timniak, we concluded that what would be most reasonable is to treat each unit like every other unit is treated in town, and that is to charge the annual minimum amount that is assessed to all other similarly situated commercial units. And that's the recommendation that Mr. Timniak and I believe is fair under the circumstances. But the unit owners are here, and they're entitled to be heard, so I would yield the floor if the chair allows.
So before, Mr. Camp, question.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, please.
Yes.
The number of commercial units for this year, if you will, billed at the 462?
Yes.
For those 11 units?
Yes.
Do we have a number for that?
Of how many how many were billed? You know, I had asked for a copy of all of the invoices, and I had not gotten a copy of all the invoices. I know some were, there was one at least, and Mr. Leonard can probably speak to this more specifically. There was one, I believe, that was about $690. There were others that were in the minimum amount, and then there were others yet in a different amount. And I haven't been able to ascertain why, other than the software programming that's how it generated the invoices. So it's clear to me that the invoices in the aggregate were not all proper because they went beyond this minimum amount, and they should not have done that.
And last question, what is the minimum amount?
It was you just said it, the
462?
462 is the per unit per annum that they're charged, but I believe that the annual sum works out to, for residential is $396, and for commercial, I want to say it was 462 is what my memory is serving on me. I don't have my notes on that. I want to say it's $462 that it ultimately comes out to. I'd have to verify my notes, though. But I'm certain Mr. Lenaker will be able to correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, so we don't know the 462 times 11, how that equates to the actual usage for that calendar year.
Well, you will hear, I'm certain, that it is substantially higher than what their actual usage is.
All right.
But they can speak. I don't want to.
Thank you, sir.
They want to put that in. They can do that themselves.
Mr. Khan.
I'll defer till the constituents speak.
Mr. Harden, do you have a question?
So your recommendation, I know you said you spoke to Chris Timinack, would be what for this property?
For each unit to be billed the minimum amount that all other similar commercial units are billed.
And is the property owner okay with that?
No, they're not. They believe that their usage is substantially less than what we're proposing. The problem is that it is factually impossible for the authority to ever determine within the 11 units which unit owner is responsible unless you treat it as one property, and then bill it as one property, and then let the association prorate it amongst themselves. That would be the only way that you could do that, but you haven't done that with other commercial parcels. So if that's what your decision is, that is perfectly appropriate, but we did not feel that we could make that decision for you. But yes, the simplest way would be you have 1 meter in, 1 discharge out, get the actuals and bill the association, if you will, and let the association spread it amongst themselves.
Any other questions at this time? No? Okay. So, Mr. Marino, it's Mr. Lenaker who,
Yes.
for the other party?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Lenaker, I'll invite you up to the podium, sir. If you can state your name and address for the record.
Sorry, just need to check. My name is Joel Lenaker. I own a business at 919-4 Stratford Avenue in Stratford. Tonight with me, as Mr. Marino has indicated, the complex is 919-937, and it is located just down the street. There are 11 unit owners, 11 units. Tonight with us, we have the president of the organization, who is Carol Garbus, who owns the Hare Inn. We have Adia Falcone, who owns 3 units in the complex, who's sitting next to her. In the far back is Elle and Kathy Gracia, and they have an insurance business there. So with 11 units, we count 6 unit owners here for this discussion. As you know, I was here 2 months ago, and I think I gave you a brief overview of what the how we've been operating. I'm going to pass around a letter that was dated June 11th, 1997, and this is from the town of Stratford, Stratford Water Pollution Control Facility. Ronald Brenton was the superintendent at the time, and this letter was addressed to Ransom's Walk Association. And it's very short, but the highlights is, and I read, beginning July 1st, 1997, commercial users will be billed based upon their actual water consumption for a 6-month period. Commercial users will no longer be billed based upon units. Now, there is some discussion about what a unit is, and I'm sure you've dealt with that before, but I also, because I keep everything, I also have a copy of my water bill, and where it says unit charge, it does indeed give a rate that I would pay. So we are interpreting the word unit as individual business units. The second part of this says, after they've made this change, that these changes are designed to make the billing system more equitable and uniform for commercial and industrial users of the sewer system. So I have one for each of you that I'll pass that around. Now, up until we received our bill in August, this is how our association has been billed for the last 30 years. We've never been delinquent. We are current, with the exception of when we made this appeal in August. We are working based upon this information. We did request information to show that something has changed as it applies to our organization, and we received no documentation from Mr. Chimchek or anyone else from the town of Stratford. We also learned that before this process happened, there was a letter sent out to some business owners about this proposed either audit, we don't even know what it is, because we were unable to get the letter that Mr. Chimchek sent to half the business owners, of which we did not get this letter. So I'm a little remiss, I can't address that letter because I don't have it in front of me. I've been told I'll be sent that tomorrow. I'm not so sure that helps us right now, but that's the luck of the draw. But apparently, some business owners were notified that this audit was going to be happening. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important that you set your rates, according to Mr. Marino, in May 29th, I believe he cited, that's when you set your rates. And at in that point in time, we were under the assumption that we were willing to pay the rate, but the billing process, we had no idea that the billing process was changing. We had given no notification up to that point. So we are operating under the assumption that this is how it's been for 30 years. Now, am I so naive to realize that things don't change in 30 years? Of course not. I know they change. But however, we could find no information that helped us with this. And then when we went to the town, we couldn't get any information from the town that would support this position, or would tell us that we were wrong. So we pursued not to agree to the agreement that Mr. Marino had put before us around March 5th or 6th, because we truly believe that we're not equitably being charged properly. Now, one question, I believe, can't see that far. Is it Owen? No, can. You asked about the question is, well, what are they paying right now? What do we know the numbers are? So from 2017, if we take 11 unit owners and we multiply that times what you're proposing to be your minimum of $396, that gets you a total of $4,356. Okay, that's if we went right the way everyone, I guess, is being billed. In 2017, we used 3,500 cubic feet of water for the entire year. If we were to take your current rate of $4.60, I said 4, I'm off by 2.2 cents, that would be a total bill for everyone of $1,647.20. Now, if I take that usage and extrapolate that out to what the current rate would be, we currently will be paying $12.30 as opposed to $4.64 based upon usage. Your ordinance is very clear that you will be charging commercial unit owners based upon their usage. All right? So therefore, we really can't stomach $12.64 when somebody else down the street is going to pay the $4.64. So we believe the bills are inaccurate because of the nature of our organization. Now, there was another question about how many bills charge per unit. I'll have to come back to it, but Mr. Marino is correct that we have 1 meter coming in, and we are all office. We're insurance agents. I'm a graphic designer. We have 1 hair salon. So therefore, we are not a light industrial user. We don't have any heavy metals going through this processing plant or coming out of from our usage whatsoever. So we believe that really we should be a different category. And I realize you might establish those categories through your ordinance process or your rate setting type of thing, but we really are different than your average condominium type of thing. Did you want me to take questions before or after? I think you have a bunch of them.
So I just wanted to kind of stop you in your tracks here. So number one is that we know that, Mr. Timiak and Mr. Marino have made some suggestions. One, the suggestions, I guess, that you guys were not in agreement to. Number two, I'd like to...
So what you said you've made, so tell me what those are.
No. Mr. Timiak and Mr. Marino said that he brought up 2 suggestions, and I asked you, and you said that you were not, in the crowd, that you were not in agreement to those 2 suggestions.
Mr. Harden, are you referring to at the last meeting when notices were sent out to all the appeals, those...
Well, Mr. Marino made a comment earlier that this gentleman would come up and speak, and I said, well, are they okay with that? And you in the crowd said, no, we're not okay with it. So reality is, I want to know how can...
No, we are okay with speaking. We're not okay with what his recommendation was.
Right, so that's what I'm talking about. So my question to you is, how can we help you out as the council, and what is it that you want us to do? The third thing is that you may have speculated that there have maybe been some, billing, oohs or outs that are not considered consistent. The fourth thing is that, so I just want to know, how can we help you?
Right, okay.
I know this goes back in history. You had the dates and times. I wasn't a council person at that time, so I really want to cut to the chase, and I want you to tell me, what can we do as a council to make this easy for you and this burden really light?
Right, okay. I'm going to answer your question about the misbilling, okay? So we had 2 unit owners that received no bill whatsoever. Not a bill whatsoever. 1 unit owner received a bill for $686 odd, all right? Then the rest of the people received bills for $398. Okay? What were you paying in the past few years? I'm sorry? What were you paying for the past few years? Past few years, we were paying the $460, whatever the current rate was, based upon the actual usage as documented by Aquaria.
What was that total bill, Mr. Lineker?
For which year would you like? Let's do 2017, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the bill for 2017 was $1,647.20. That's based upon actual usage.
Okay. Mr. Can?
Sir, do you have the bill for 2016?
Do I have the bill numbers from 2016? I don't have them calculated. I'm going to need a minute to calculate them. I have the usage.
Oh, usage. Is the usage roughly the same as 2017?
Yes, it is. That I can tell you.
And these are individually owned units?
They are individually owned units. So so our proposal to make this better for everyone and what we need your help with, which is a really great question, is we propose that because there is no way for us to break out the individual usage, that the association take on the responsibility like they have in the last 30 years to pay the sewer bill, and that the sewer bill is based upon the water usage from Aquarium. That is our recommendation, and that would be acceptable to us.
Mr. Hart.
Mr. Marino, I know you gave two options, and
Mr. Marino, you could use that one.
this third option that this gentleman is presenting, where do we stand with that? I know there were only two options that were sufficient with you and Mr. Timiak. So is there any leverage or any, third option?
In looking at the potential options for us, for purposes of recommendations, we were trying to remain as consistent as possible with how all other unit owners are being treated. And we didn't feel appropriate for us to make an outlier just on our own recommendation. We felt that if you were going to go in that direction, which I appreciate and I understand why you might go in that direction, because it's based on actual use. But the part of the concern was when you're billing by a unit rather than by an actual flow, because you don't necessarily always have actuals in the commercial setting in a timely way to get your bills out. That's why, as in some of the other ones, we're pushing to get flow meters put on so that we could determine what the actual discharge into our system is rather than the water usage. So in this regard, since it was impossible to do anything to individualize other than to make a recommendation exactly as the gentleman has suggested, which sounds like was the historical way that it was done. And as counsel to the attorney to the council, I would say that it's perfectly legally supportable to go in that direction. There is language in your regulations that support actuals as the basis for, but there's also the question of any surcharges that you might assert based upon the OM&R expenses as well. So it's not necessarily just one number, but I would just point that out, that what the gentleman is referring to is, I believe it's 17287D, that says specifically that the charges will be based on the amount of the actual flows.
Mr. Harden, sorry, Greg.
Define OM&R. OM&R is the total, so it's the operation and maintenance of the sewage system, including replacement funds, and then it's defined as OM&R. For completeness, it's the total cost of the operation and maintenance of this.
Dave.
You've done really great, and I feel bad that you didn't get the information that you did request. And, someone made this comment about, if we do this for one business, we have to do it for all. And one of the things that I realize is that there are some businesses that you have to cradle, and there are some businesses that you have to make special considerations for. And I think that you've done your due diligence, and you've provided us with the information that you have. And, I am sorry, deeply sorry that you have to go through this and sit here and render all this information. And I think that if we went the way that you went, I think he said that there are some surcharges that will be added to the proposal that you're asking. Is that what I understand?
I would have to defer to Mr. Timiak and staff because I don't get involved in the creation of the bills. I just wanted to point out that, again, when you went through your process in May, you very likely put together your budget, and the amount of your charges likely included or took into consideration, which would also include your flat charges for the 396, what your OM&R would be. And that's ultimately, because I'm assuming you didn't just come to that number by throwing a dart against a balloon.
So
if you are going to do surcharges, and I'm not so sure that surcharges might have met for industrial users, people that are putting heavy metals into the system. The bills that we've received in 30-some-odd years, there's no list of a surcharge. I would urge you, do you have in your minutes where you address surcharges and how you set the rates for surcharges?
So, Mr. Marino, so actually, hold on, Mr. Harden, any other further follow-up to that?
So I just wanted to quickly say, there's not going to be a happy medium, but I'm willing to understand you and kind of come to, an agreement to, not among the council, but myself. So there's not going to be a happy medium. I know, I saw you shaking your head, and there may be some surcharges, there may not be, but maybe you won't get the cost factors that we put to you at this moment. And it may be a little lesser, but there's not going to be a happy medium. So I just want to tell you that. I'm bored with you, and I totally support what you're saying because you have enough supporting detail, and I think you may be accurate or you may not be. So I just want to let you know that there might not be a happy medium for you, but it may be less than what they're asking you to pay.
We do understand the process and that you have the ability to say yay or nay. We do understand that. We're taking this opportunity to put our best foot forward and to present perhaps a whole or other properties might be in the same similar situation, and that it could become more equitable for all businesses. So we are taking this opportunity. We would thank you for hearing us. We do realize that you have the final say. I don't know much more than we've presented all our appeals letters to you. We've given you all the numbers. We've identified where we feel the inequity is. We've identified in your ordinances where the shortcomings are. We would hope that you would take all of this into consideration and remedy it, so going forward it will be more equitable for everyone, because we are here to pay. We're business owners. We've been here for years, so there's 8 business owners here that have never been in these chambers, right? We come, we work, we leave. We just feel that it needs to be equitable for all, and paying, if we go back again to those numbers, for somebody to pay $12.32 a rate based upon the way you're billing this right now, and with giving us no notice that there was no audit, giving us no methodology whatsoever, we have to come forward and say something, because we're not getting that information. But I think, if that's what you deem that you're going to do, and you're going to bill certain people $12.82 for or $12.32 for their services and others not, then that's your decision. And we will stand by it, of course, and we will be good citizens and, of course, pay the rate.
Mr. Can. Yes, sir.
Too early for a motion?
Let me just ask one question. I just have any other questions before I will take yours. Yes.
So, Vin, Attorney Vin, just want to clarify. So I think if I'm listening to this problem, it's probably like a lot of things in Stratford, and it goes to what Dave Harden says. There's a hodgepodge of other places. There might be a place with 10 just like himself, 11, and they have individual units. Then they have another unit like themselves where there's only one unit, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I equate this on the commercial. And by the way, you use the rate $396. That's for the residential.
No, our total annual fee, the minimum charge is $396 to each unit owner.
Yeah, it's actually, though, because you're commercial, it's actually $462.
The rate is $462. The bill that we're going to be getting based upon the minimum charge on our bill, each unit owner per year will pay $396.
Yeah.
That's where we come up with the $4,600.
Okay, so whatever, I don't agree with you, but because to me, that's the commercial, that's the residential rate. So I don't know.
Let me back up. We're paying $462.
Correct.
We are paying $462.
That's all I'm just saying. But anyway.
But your minimum, just so you know, your tax assessor sends minimum bills out, right? We pay the bill, according to her, we will pay $198. Each unit owner will pay $198 twice a year because we pay the minimum. So 198 times 2 is we're going to pay $396.
And I don't know, I haven't been able to ascertain where that came from.
Yeah, because it doesn't.
Your minutes are clear. It says $4.62 per unit per annum for commercial. and then $396 per annum for residential.
For residential, that's what I'm
And
saying.
that's all your minutes.
There's something wrong there. It's actually a higher number. But here's the point, and the problem I'm seeing, you know, and you've probably heard this. You got the little old lady who lives alone and uses $396, and you got the guy like me who's got 4 adults in there and 2 children using $396. That's the problem here to rectify it. I think quite honestly, for 30 years, if you want to use that, you guys got the benefit of it.
I would just respectfully tell you that we are commercial and we are not residential, and your ordinance does make
I'm using an
provisions.
analogy, though, that you have this, because you're going to say, what I'm saying is somebody down the road that had 6 units, that was paying individually 6 units for the last 30 years, has paid much more than you have. And we're trying to rectify that. That's my point. We're trying to slowly get equity. Do you see my point?
I see your point.
Okay, I'm talking about business. Now, I was saying the person, and the reason I use the residential, is because the person that uses it doesn't use as much as the person with five units, yet they pay the same amount of money.
I agree.
So now we go down the road here, we've got somebody who's paying for 10 units, 10 costs, and you're saying because for 30 years you only paid 1 cost, that's the way it should continue, when they weren't necessarily being on consumption because, again, we have to run a plant. That's where the surcharge, the big picture here, we have to keep everything going. So the person over here was cheated, and you got the benefit of it. Now we're trying to rectify it. That's what I want you to understand, because what I hear is somehow you feel, and to a certain degree, I agree with you 100%, they mishandled the paperwork, so I'm not going to say that the town did. But I am saying that I think just leaving it the way it is isn't the right way to do it either. There has to be some give.
Okay, then we're willing to listen to what the give part is.
But as long as you understand that you've benefited the last 30 years also.
We've paid our fair share.
You paid what you were billed.
That's exactly.
You paid what you were billed. But again, if there's somebody down the road with all offices and they're paying on an individual rate of $396 or $462, they're paying more than you are now.
That's correct.
And they've been paying for that for a long time. So what makes you different than those folks over there?
They got taken advantage of. They got taken advantage of because they paid $12.83 for the rate as opposed to the $4.62.
So we have to rectify them too.
Yeah, they have to be. That's absolutely. All those people out there that are paying more for what they're used, they got charged $12.80. They got charged $12 more plus all these years as opposed to being paid for their use, because your ordinance clearly states that commercial users are supposed to use for what they use. That's your ordinance. I don't make the ordinances.
I'm not disputing that.
So that's what we have to go
I'm not
by.
disputing that, but what I've sensed from the 2 times you've been here, you feel like you're being cheated and everything else. And I think what's happened is a process to get it correct. So I think, to follow up Mr. Hardin, you're over here, we're trying to get you here, but really I think we need to be somewhere in the middle.
But your solution to us is to do exactly what you want. You want to charge us minimum rate for each unit owner. That's your solution.
Yes.
Okay, so where's the compromise?
Well, that may be the solution. I haven't come to a final conclusion, but what I'm saying is that what I hear is you want this, and that's what you've had, and that's what you want.
Because we haven't had any other compromise. No other option has been given to us that's a compromise.
We're trying to work through that right now.
We are, and that's why I welcome, whatever your choice is for a compromise, I'd love to hear the compromise. But I haven't heard a compromise between those 2 positions.
Well, I think we're, because we're here right now. That's where we're at.
And just if I may, for input is, and again, I don't want to mix concepts. Connecticut General Statute 7-255 is the statute that governs your annual review of your rates and allows you to classify properties into separate categories and to assess your rates. That's what you do annually. It's normally in May. So what you did last May, on May 29th, is you established your rates. $396 for residential and $4.62 per unit per annum for commercial. Those are established amounts. The statute allows, it was properly noticed, there was a public hearing, there was properly noticed at the conclusion of the public hearing, and the ratepayers had the statutory right, I believe it's 21 days from the date of publication, to take appeals to the Superior Court. No such appeals were taken. So those rates are fixed. The issue before this council at this moment are whether or not the invoices, the billings, because your regulation does not give a second bite to the apple with respect to your rates. With respect to your regulation says if there's an error in the billings. So, you know, I appreciate, and I've tried to explain this to Mr. Lineker and for the benefit of the rest of the association, is we're really not here now arguing whether $4.62 is the right amount for the commercial users. That was set, that appeal period has expired, and there's no right to challenge that. The only issue, I believe, is whether or not the invoices sent to the several units were accurate. I've already acknowledged I believe they were not, because they should be established at the minimum rate. You know, and they should have received 11 minimum bills because their water usage is less than the minimum, period, is what I believe the outcome, the proper outcome is. Not going to be satisfactory, but I explained to Mr. Lineker that the proper process would be for him to come back when you're, for the public hearing at the rates and argue why it should be lower and address it at that point. And so that's where I am at as a matter of law and a matter of process.
Okay. And we do not question the rates. 462 is the rate. We have no problems with that. What we do question is, for 30 years past practice, we've been billed a certain way. Yes, you're right. There was public hearing for your rate, but that public hearing was held May 29th, all right? We did not receive any, so at that point in time, we received no correspondence from this community that you were even going to change the billing. Because half of the business owners got that letter, the other half didn't. So I want to know who chose that. Some people get notice and some people don't get notice.
So, Ms. Lerner.
So therefore, we had no opportunity to come to you.
Everyone has,
and we can going forward. We'll be glad to do that.
That's fine.
But I just want to make it clear that
Understood.
We had no reason to suspect that there would be a problem because we received no notice, but some business owners did, like McDonald's, like Two Roads. Okay. Well, you know what? As far as I'm not going to say it. We pay taxes just like everybody else does. I urge you in the future, whoever is running the show as far as tax assessing, that they give notice to all people. Because we're all equal as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, sir.
Everyone's equal, yes. No one's disputing that. Mr. Can, or Mr. Harden. Who was? Go on. Mr. Can.
Okay. I'd like to make a two-part motion for the Commission's consideration. The first part is that Ransom's Walk pay their 2018 WPCA bill using the same $4.62 per unit per annum as they had for the prior years. And I would ask the town to produce such a bill based on the usage of that 11-unit property for 2018. The second part of the motion is I'd ask the town to get a short inventory of similar, what I'll call business condominiums, where you have one building with one inflow and one outflow that could be individually owned units. These are small units, and see how those units are billed. And if they are billed at the 462 minimum, then for 2019, we would present that in writing as 2019's bill to Ransom's Walk. But until we're with some certainty that that's the process that we use for other similarly constructed business condominiums, that's the two-part motion.
So I have a motion on the table.
Can I make two statements before we?
I need a second for that motion first, before I move on. Second by Jim. Any discussion?
Number one, is this something that would be acceptable for us to do, even though we've already had the motions put in place?
It is within your discretion, based upon your regulatory framework, to address this in this way. So I think that's perfectly fine. I would just, to the extent it's insightful at all for the evening, but what you'll eventually, be acting on is, I believe it's 611 is it Main Street? One of the other ones before you. And that one, there are multiple buildings on site. One water meter and one discharge for both buildings. Historically, the property was utilized by one business. Now it's being utilized by multiple businesses, and they are paying, you are agreeing to dismiss their appeal because they understand now that there's a per unit charge. So that is an example before you where you do have separate buildings, same parcel, but they're going to be paying the minimum per unit.
The 462?
Yes.
And then my second question to this gentleman here, does that sound within reason?
It certainly sounds reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it's a statement. I'm a little confused. Maybe I'm slower, but, you know, when I hear something, Greg, and I know Greg is always very good about these things, but it sounds to me complicated, and we're making, I guess, Attorney Vin, I need you to agree or disagree. We're making a general motion that's going to affect a lot of possible things, and I don't know if that's in the best interest of anyone, including the folks here.
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one is the only thing before you is this one appeal. So that's the only issue for you, and you're to consider them on a case-by-case basis because the evidence that you receive on any of these appeals are not going to be exact. I understand the nuance concern here because to the extent, particularly on these older constructed commercial plazas, they may be more similarly situated where you had one water intake and one discharge, so it becomes more problematic to determine to any reasonable degree of certainty what the actual amounts would be. I do not know, as I stand here, how many of those parcels exist in town. I'm certain there's more than just the one that we're addressing tonight, but no one else, other than that other parcel that I addressed at 611 Main Street, who fit into this scenario, have appealed under your regulation. Doesn't mean they can't in the future,
But right now.
but for now. So I would suggest during this cycle, we act more exactly and more specifically with respect to how we're billing and how we're assessing.
So, Mr. Marino, if I may, Mr. Candy, would you consider an amendment to your motion to essentially approve their address, the Ransom's Walk address at the 2017 rate for 2018, and that would be the motion?
Just keep it to that part one.
Speaking to to the council's point that this is a case-by-case basis, I personally like the idea of sticking it to a case-by-case basis, and we can look at regulations and going forward.
Can I ask clarification? Are we saying that what they paid in 2017, we're going to basically carry 2018, and we're going to discuss 2019 will be different?
That's how I interpreted Mr. Can's motion.
Just as from what I heard, and I think what we're saying is whatever Aquarion says their water was for 2018, you take that amount, multiply it by the $4.62, and that would generate their
The 2018 bill.
For 2018. In other words, it's not going to be exact to the year before because their water usage may have been different.
That's fine.
Right, so it would be water usage times 462 equals what they pay.
Correct. That would be how to solve the 2018 bill, and then without any particular statement for future years, just understanding that the town will do an analysis and assuredly send you a letter on a timely basis if there's any change to that billing process.
That would be most acceptable.
And Mr. Chairman, just so
Yes,
there's no confusion on that notice concern raised by Mr. Lineker, there was no notice sent vis-a-vis your public hearing. Your public hearing is noticed by way of publication notice. Everyone in your community, all your ratepayers for that matter, received the identical notice. It's put in the paper, and that's what you're obligated to do. Post-public hearing, it's put in the paper. That was your obligation. It's my understanding that Mr. Timniak saw there was a number, it might have been as many as 50 outliers, meaning bills that jumped dramatically. And to try to get ahead of those ratepayers, the shock of receiving something that may have gone from 20,000 to 80,000, he sent out letters to those ratepayers because of the large variance between what they were paying and what the new bill was going to be. I'm not suggesting that going from $1,500 to $4,500 is not insignificant, but I think what Mr. Timniak was doing was looking at the larger variances, and that's why those letters were sent out.
Okay, so any further discussion on the motion on the table, which Mr. Can did amend? Mr. Poisson.
Yes, Mr. Attorney, can you just clarify for me, would this be simpler if it was just two separate motions? Because I think we're taking an appeal here, and the second part of the motion is very well intended, but it shouldn't be part of this association's appeal. That second part of the motion was more like instructions for the town attorney.
He took it back. Is that, you corrected, you amended your motion?
Not that part.
Okay.
We'll keep the motion to the 2018 bill that is being appealed, that it will be based on the same 462 times units per annum, your actual 2018 aquarium usage. That is what we'll do for 2018. And that's the motion. And then, can I open discussion? Well, does anyone want to second that? Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Perello, discussion?
And for discussion, maybe a second motion from the commission to evaluate this circumstance so we can assure that if bills go out next year, then they are equitable across all similar property owners.
So let me take that first motion on the vote then, unless there's any further discussion on that first.
One more question.
Yes.
Mr. Leneker, is it?
Yes, it is.
So if this motion passes, is that exactly how you guys have been paying your bill for the last years?
That is correct.
Okay, so are you guys happy with that motion?
They say yes, I say yes.
Right, well, you're here to speak, and we want to hear your opinion, and
Yes.
we want to soon.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I had, Mr. O'Brien.
So I understand, for all those years, you received one association bill that you took care of yourself each.
That is
each year.
correct, because when we put together our yearly budget,
Right.
we had a line item that was sewer usage. And it was based upon that letter that I gave you a copy of.
Right.
And every year, the town of Stratford sent us a bill twice a year, and we paid it twice a
Yeah.
year.
Is that, Greg, is that what you mean by your motion too? I don't think they should get individual bills this for
No, that's-
2018.
That's what he meant.
One bill,
Yeah, we're not changing anything.
yeah.
And you guys divide it up amongst yourselves, just like you've been doing forever.
That is correct.
Any other questions? There is a motion. No further questions on that motion? Okay. I will call to a vote. All in favor for the motion proposed by Mr. Can, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I have just one question.
Yes, sir.
Some unit owners have already paid, and because they didn't want to incur late fees or penalties, we did pay a half a year. The association paid a half a year. I assume we work with who do we work with to get that balanced?
Mr. Chairman, I will work with Mr. Leneker and Mr. Timniak to make certain that the property gets, from a reconciliation standpoint, gets a credit for any payments made from any unit owners. And we'll aggregate all the monies paid. We'll establish what is actually due, and to the extent that they have an overpayment, they can either maintain a credit on hand, or they can have a refund.
That's fine.
And if there's a refund due, I will bring that back to your attention. I'll have it approved by way of motion.
That's fine. Anybody have an objection to that? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, to the extent you feel, I think I got the instruction of what Mr. Can is looking for, and I will work with Mr. Timniak to get that data so that you have it. I'll see if we can get it for next month, but I do think it's something that you should take into consideration as you go into the next budget cycle.
To pursue that exercise, do we need a motion, or is it?
I took it as
No,
instruction.
I'll
but if
take
you
it as an instruction and to present back findings at the next meeting.
That's fine.
As we're coming into the budget season. That's fine with me.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second, by Mr. Tiki. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.